Wow. So the expectation is high after that introduction, right? I don't know if I could live up to that. I'm going to do the COVID thing. Even though I call Chuck Papa Chuck and I know that he's not going to get me sick, but you lead by example, right? At least that's what we're supposed to do. Yes. Yes. Well, good evening. It's great to be in Montgomery County. It's great to be in Independence. Third time I've been here. First time was with Leadership Kansas. Second time it was to visit Papa Chuck and his beautiful wife in their house that was just right down yonder. And of course today. And sadly, I would have been here a lot earlier, but the Rona got in the way of that. And it sucked because the campaign that we dreamed and aspired to run has not been the campaign that we wanted to. We wanted to ensure that this was a campaign in which each and every one of you had access to me more than just once, that we were able to just not only talk with our fellow Democrats, but also with our brothers and sisters who are Republican, because their voices also matter. They're part of our state. And that we would have at least some movement and that we would already be on first name basis. But God willing, I will be elected in November and that'll be able to happen. Yes. You guys are feisty. I like you. I was tired. This is the last stop of the day and it's like, okay, I got it. Woo, I got it in me. I could do this. So a little bit about myself. I was born in New York. I was raised in Puerto Rico by my grandparents. And I've said this story a few times and it's emotional for me because I've lost both of my grandparents. I lost Mima, my grandpa, to cancer in 1998, July 5th, and April 26th last year, I lost my grandmother. And they were my rock. They were the ones that taught me the values of hard work, of integrity, and making sure that everything that we do is with family in mind first. Now, lucky for you or unlucky for you, I have no blood family in Kansas. So as you can tell, his nickname is Papa Chuck because I adopt the people that I love. Nathan and Sheena are my family. That's his son and his son's wife. Nicole and Ryan are my brother and sister. And as you can tell, we have so much in common, especially Ryan. Our hair is just the same. Ryan, wave. Especially the blue eyes, you know. So to me, the people that I have the privilege of serving, I treat them like my family. And there's a reason for that. When I was 17, my mom went to Puerto Rico because she was fleeing from a very abusive marriage. And if any of you has had trauma in your life, you know that unless you actually work really hard to understand it and not repeat it, you end up repeating what is normal to you. And that's what I end up doing. I ended up in Puerto Rico meeting a guy, got pregnant while I was homeless because I left my house when I was 17. And I figured out that I had to do something not just for myself because it wasn't just about me at that point, it was about my son. And by the grace of beautiful people, that one of them, Mami Pucci, let me stay in her cot for a while. Then I went and applied for school after 2 years with withdrawals with Fs because I was homeless and trying to go to school and it just didn't work out for me. I had somebody that gave me a chance to go back to school so that I could have health care and so that I could have student loans so that I could kind of overcome the homelessness that I was living through. My friends were there for me. My son is named after one of my best friends who let me stay in his room so that I could put a crib. And he slept in the living room on the floor so that my son could have a crib in a bedroom while we were getting started. And that is the story of my life. You see, my life and my story is not my story. It's the story of the people who have just cared enough to give a little bit of what they already had. Even sometimes when it wasn't a lot. But to me, it meant the world. And then I ended up singing in church. I used to go to a Catholic church in Mayagüez Terras, which was the church that was right next to the campus. And I used to sing in the choir, and I started losing a lot of weight after having Eric, and they found out that I had breast cancer. For some reason, I always touched the right side because it's just, you just never forget that. And after I survived that, and they dealt with it, it was a rare form of cancer. It's called Paget's disease. So it was in the outside, and they waited so long that it went inside, and they did the removal of that portion, and Father Pat said, "Hey, Michelle, you're smart. You shouldn't be here in Puerto Rico." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I don't know. I want to beat cancer's behind." I didn't say behind. And he's like, well, wherever you want to go, let's figure it out. So somebody talked to me about Wichita State University. They were doing research on the golden hamster. And I didn't think that they would accept me because, of course, you're in Puerto Rico. You think of these nice universities as a state university. I thought it was a huge deal. Why would they accept me? I had 2 years of withdrawals with Fs. I was in year 7 of my bachelor's degree. But I'm stubborn. If I'm setting out to do something, I try to do it and finish it. And Wichita State gave me a chance. They took my voc rehab. They gave me Pell Grant. I was able to do student loans. I was able to get Section 8 when I came. And guess what? In 1 year, Father Pat was right. I was alone with my son and was able to finish my degree. So one of the jokes that I make, is my degree is in biology with a concentration in molecular, and I use it every day. And then not only that, but it was so impactful that it took me 8 years to get my bachelor's. So technically I have a PhD in my bachelor's degree, right? I wish. But so my first job was working Upper Bound, which is a program to help students, first generation, get to college. And for the first time in my life, I learned that my story wasn't my own. And for the first time, I dared to share my challenges with these students in hopes that they would understand that maybe life could be difficult, but it doesn't have to stop there. And that you can further yourself by educating yourself and aspiring to be whatever you want to be. And from there, I started working at the Office of International Programs of Wichita State. So I was working with all the international students. That's how I met the girls' dad. And trauma repeats itself. It was a very abusive marriage, but I have 2 wonderful girls from that marriage. So pretty soon we relocated to Topeka, and I found myself a single mom of 3. And in 2008, right after my divorce, I ended up having similar challenges to the ones that I had in Puerto Rico. It took me till last year from 2008 to pay off all those bills. Which brings me to what I'm doing here today, but more on that later. So I started doing financial literacy education across the country for women with a nonprofit called MANA, which focuses on women's empowerment. Then I started working at Housing and Credit Counseling, helping families get their finances together. It's a nonprofit organization. Then after that, I became the executive director for Habitat for Humanity. And because I had a mentorship program for girls, because my passion of empowering kids, somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, we want to start talking to kids about downtown redevelopment. You have a whole bunch of kids you talk to. Could you join this group? And I was like, yeah, sure. Yeah. So little did I know that there were a whole bunch of suits. And I don't know if you can tell, I am not your typical polished person that's running for office. And I remember sitting in those meetings thinking, I don't understand what they're talking about. And it was so awkward for me that I wanted to contribute something, so I would bring breakfast. And for the longest time, I was like, where's the kid part? Where's the kid part? And they're like, yeah, wait. And they started talking about urban development and infrastructure and things that I had no idea about. And then we started going to these meetings, and they were the council meetings. And God bless my daughters. My son has had some challenges. So at some point in time, he was not at home. But the girls were always with me, and those kids had to go to those meetings with me. So they would survive council meetings. Sometimes, they would be like this. But they would go with me, and they remember that council chamber. And after years of trying, we started this, the Capital District Project was our volunteer group. It was finally in 2012 when we got the vote approved. And it was a young girl, Michelle Hubbard, one of my mentees, who spoke to the council and said, if y'all don't do something for downtown, it sucks. We're all gonna leave. And even though she wasn't the deciding voice, it was hearing from the young people in the community that helped our council members and our mayor at that time pass that vote. And even though it wasn't unanimous, it passed. And if you go to downtown Topeka today and compare it to what it was years ago, it was the voices of people coming together and being elevated that made all the difference. And I'll never forget being asked to run for council because Larry Wolgass, who became the mayor, was going to leave that seat vacant, and we were neighbors. And I was thinking, Larry, one of these things is not like the other. I kind of don't look like the district. I don't talk like the district. I kind of have an accent. Do you think that people would elect me? And he said, Michelle, I think that your heart is in the right place and people are going to notice that, so why don't you give it a try? And like with everything, my friends here can tell you, all of the big decisions in the house are made at the kitchen table. I don't know how many of you guys have family meetings, but my daughters and I, whenever there's a big discussion, it's like family meeting, and they're like, oh God, what's happening? And that I remember we were in my little apartment back then in Misty Glen, and I told the girls, hey, I'm being asked to run for council. Is a big commitment. Mommy would be not just mommy, but she would be serving all the people that live in this area. How do you guys feel about this? And I'll never forget, Lorraine looked at me, my youngest daughter, and she said, Ma, is that like being the president? And I'm like, no. And she's like, and I said, you know that room? And she's like, oh, the big, meeting. And I'm like, yeah, that. And she's like, Mom, if you do that, you're showing me that I could do anything. And if you win, was what she said. And I remember thinking, oh God, well, let's do this. And we worked as a family. We would door knock every weekend. And it was a great experience for those kids to go. I tell you what, I think I won the election because of the kids. They would door knock and they learned the spiel and they would talk to people and they were like this little, and it was glorious. And we won. And I started serving the people of Topeka while I was still at Habitat for Humanity. Later, I was offered a job doing diversity and inclusion at Westar then, now Evergy. And then I got promoted to do supplier diversity. So I'll tell you what, life is pretty good. For the first time in my life, I was able to pay my bills. I left the nonprofit sector. However, in that process, I started learning by my constituents about other issues that I understand all too well. Families talking to me about issues with fair housing. Families talking to me about issues with healthcare. Something that I still till this day have trouble checking the mailbox. I am committed to paying everything online because if I don't ever see another envelope, it'll be just fine by me. Because if any of you has had a catastrophic illness and has had to deal with bill after bill after bill after bill, you know what I'm talking about. And it shouldn't be this way. Not in the richest country in the world. And then I started hearing about families, and even as a mayor, we had a task force on broadband and how important it was for our kids, because now our kids have Chromebooks, but guess what? They don't have the resources or the finances to afford that broadband. And the roads that keep crumbling, and the highways that need support, and the bridges, and our farmers. And even though I'm listening to all of these challenges as mayor, I knew that there was nothing that I could do at that level. And when asked if I would consider running for Congress, there's several people here that can tell you that I said no for the better part of a year. Because I was thinking, who would elect me? Who would vote for me? I don't know if when I go to rural Kansas and if I go to southeast Kansas, people would be willing or interested. And before I decide, thank you, I love it. Thank you. And before I decided to run, I did an experiment, and I went to Pittsburgh, and I think that's where Carol and I met for the first time. We called several of the leaders of Southeast Kansas, and I showed up and I said, hey, I haven't made up my mind. I know that you guys have heard my name, but it doesn't make any sense for me to run if you guys don't feel like you can support me. So the first thing that I want to do is hear about the issues that matter to you guys, and then after that, let's have a conversation about what I believe, and if we're feeling like we're on the same page, and you guys can overlook some differences, I think that I'd be happy to be your servant and take care of your interests and take care of your families, because the options are not great. And I left that day with the blessing of Cherokee County, Montgomery County, Crawford County, and Labette County as well, because Greg was also there. And I thought, we're gonna make this happen. And here we are today. Here we are today. So before we had a pandemic, healthcare was a concern. And now we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I tell you what, it sucks that I cannot just shake your hand and give you a hug and stand next to you and just hold your hand while I'm hearing your concerns. Because if anybody that knows me can attest, that's just who I am. I think that part of it is the Puerto Rican, Italian, and Black in me, and the fact that we don't know a stranger, right? And that it's okay, because I don't see people for parties. I see people for people. When I see people, I see gratitude, because I see all of the individuals that at one point in my life didn't know me and stood by me, which is why I'm so excited to stand up for you and to represent you and bring your voices with me when I get to DC. Thank you, because I know days like today remind me that we're going to make history. And you know why we're going to make history? We're going to make history because Kansans deserve better. Kansas had the chance of expanding Medicaid. And you will never hear me speak ill of my opponent. That's just not who I am. I am not going to do that. And it shouldn't be necessary for you to trash people and lie about them to win an election. Actually, we should demand better from our leaders. And I have committed to that, and I have stuck to that, and I will not go there. But if we're going to talk strictly policy, my opponent did vote with our past governor, Mr. Brownback, to not expand Medicaid. We've had 4 hospital closures. The people that are dying in this pandemic are individuals that had pre-existing conditions that were not taken care of, that could have been taken care of had we expanded Medicaid. Sheena reminded me today, she's like, Michelle, do you realize that even if you're a single person and you lose your job and have 0 income, you don't have access to health care in the state? That's violence. That's violence. We're supposed to lift each other up. I'm not talking about giving everybody filet mignons. I'm talking about giving people the opportunity to have health. Let's not forget education. Our public school system is the cornerstone of equality, where people could just nurture their brains and figure out where their talents are. God ingrained each and every one of us with some sort of talent. I firmly believe that every one of us has a gift that none of us has. You know, we maybe have some things that we rhyme on, but you're probably an expert in something that I will never be able to touch. And the whole premise of an education, especially a public education, is that our kids are going to be entrusted to amazing teachers that are going to invest in their lives and they're going to nurture them. However, our state decided to defund our schools to the point that they were sued by the Supreme Court. At the time in which we are discovering that our children have much more need other than just education. Our kids are going to school hungry. Our kids are going to school with trauma. Our kids are going to school in need of heroes. And our teachers are heroes that are being stripped little by little of the resources that they need in a classroom. And our federal government is talking about using federal dollars for public schools. It's asinine. We cannot do that. We cannot use individuals that go to a 4-year degree and charge them predatory loans for their education that they're not able to pay back. And then are paying for years and years and years and are not able to achieve the goal of home ownership. There's just some basic values. It's just basic values of allowing people to have opportunity. Everybody should have opportunity, regardless of their zip code, regardless of the color of their skin, regardless of who they worship, and regardless of who they love. So my beloved Kansans, from here in awesome Independence, the things that I believe in are simple: common decency, truthfulness and integrity, advocating for your health care first and foremost, ensuring that Medicaid expansion dollars are still available for this state when they pass it next year, because Governor Kelly is going to make sure that it passes. Yes. To make sure that in DC, we finally get to the point that we negotiate prescription drug prices so that we don't have to look at Mexico and Canada and wonder what's the difference here. And the other thing that matters to me is that we could bill mental health care the same way that we bill a regular doctor's appointment without maximum number of appointments. Because that contributes to the stigma of mental health, and it must stop. I believe in considering more improvements to our infrastructure. to include broadband and figuring out a way that our children have access to it because it's no longer a luxury. I want to support our farmers that right now are struggling because this deal with China ended up bad. Our ranchers are losing money and they're selling their cattle for a loss because it's gotten past the point that they're feeding the cattle past the point that they would have sold it. Our farmers, in many cases, are having crops rot. And they don't want handouts. Kansans are proud people that are dying to get to work and do their part. And what we should have done was negotiated other trade lines so that our farmers wouldn't be hurting. But it didn't happen because nobody talked to our Kansas farmers before they went into that pissing match. It has to stop. It's not about parties. I may be a Democrat, but I am going to love and represent Republicans and independents with the same respect and dignity. Because above any party line, we are Kansans and we're Americans. So, enough about me. I want to hear from you. And I know that this is something people look at me and they're like, what? Yeah, I want to hear from you. I want to hear your concerns. I want to hear what are the things that are keeping you up at night. And if you want to ask me any question, I'm just going to be here to answer questions. So, let's hear from you guys.